Hi everyone, you're listening to a career advice webinar by the Royal Australian Chemical Institute, the professional association for chemists in Australia. I'm Dave Samet, coordinator of the RACI mentoring program. Tonight we talk to mentors who have several years, even decades of experience and are well established in their careers. We're going to focus on discussing the lessons that we wish we'd known at the beginning of our careers, all the things that we've had to learn the hard way. And we'll talk about the insight and wisdom that comes with that experience. I've got to say we're also going to talk a little bit about what that experience might be able to offer for people suffering through the COVID crisis. Before we start this evening's panel session, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are meeting all around Australia. We recognise the elders, past, present and emerging, and also recognise their contributions as Australia's first scientists and engineers, building a healthy and safe community, what they've done and what we can still learn from their ways. We would also very much like to thank the sponsors to the RACI Career Development Program, Envirolab, Laboratory Credit Union and DCS Technical, and for the first time ever we have all of our sponsors actually participating tonight. So I'm joined tonight by four excellent panellists. Brian Krieger of the Workplace Health and Safety in Queensland, Leanne Harris from Laboratory Credit Union, Mary Small from I love that I've misspelled this, from the Very Small Consultancy, dear oh dear, and David Springer, I put it from Mark Small, apparently you've got a brother or something who's, and David Springer, who's the Commercial Manager of Envirolab Group. So, thank you all so much for participating in this event. I guess I'll start with going around the panel and just ask you to give a 2-minute introduction about yourself, your position, and what you do. Let's start with you, Leanne.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'm Leanne Harris. I'm the General Manager of Laboratories Credit Union. I've been in that role for about 5 years, but prior to that, I've worked in banking and credit unions for over 30 years. Laboratories Credit Union, just a little bit of background. We were started in 1954 by the employees of the CSIRO in New South Wales. And so over those years, we've maintained that relationship with CSIRO, but we've also extended our reach to various other science-related organisations and whatever. So for me, it's been an interesting career. And I hope, I can give some advice that's worthy for everybody. I'm
sure you will. Thank you. Mary.
Hi, my name's Mary Small. I'm a graduate from the University of Sydney with a PhD in organic chemistry. I worked for about 10 years in medical research on grant funding, and then I got a lucky break and was hired by a multinational company, pesticides and veterinary drugs, and I ran the analytical laboratory for about 12 years. Then I moved to being a safety manager. That lasted about 10 years, and then I got made redundant, and now I sort of run my one-man band consultancy with regards to what I call human food safety. So I'm sort of coming towards the end of my professional career.
Okay. David.
Yes, so I am the commercial manager of Envirolab. So we're a large private environmental laboratory. So I'm based in the Sydney lab. So I've been in labs, always environmental labs, for probably about the last 30 years, so private and government. And what do I do now? I recently explained that to a small child. I talk a lot on the phone, write a lot of emails, and I do a lot of schmoozing.
Sounds like my job.
That sounds like the Toyota ad. Project manager.
Yes.
Absolutely. And Brian.
Hi, I'm Brian Krieger. I don't actually currently work in any chemical-related business. I'm the manager for the workplace health and safety response to the Dreamworld fatalities and the safety systems that are being developed and have been implemented through the Workplace Health and Safety Act. I currently manage 2 senior electrical and mechanical engineers, very different people from chemists. I work with 6 of the fixed amusement parks in Queensland. How did I get there? I did a Bachelor of Applied Science, followed up by a Master's, which finished in 93. There was a certain J curve from Paul Keating that basically said there were no jobs around. So I managed to score a PhD scholarship. That took me some time. And in 1999, I sort of finished up with that. And in the meantime, I picked up a couple of jobs working as a consultant, doing data analysis. Then I was a forensic toxicologist for about 5 years, then a forensic drug analysis chemist working in the Racing Science Centre up here in Brisbane. And then I got an interest in safety, moved to emergency services, trying to get onto the big red trucks. Completely failed in that, but ended up with the Major Hazards Facility team, which deals with managing large chemical facilities, safety oversight of safety systems. So that's my story.
Fair enough. Well, I say fair enough because I spent the first 5 years of my career in the lab desperately afraid that my life was going to end with the words oops and boom. So I used to literally chant to myself like a mantra, never add an acid to water. Never add water to an acid, I should say. You know.
Oh, dear.
Now, look, I think what's wonderful about this panel is we have a diversity of experience. You know, we have government, we have private enterprise, we have you know, this is what's great about the RACI mentoring program. And certainly for all of our listeners tonight, I would actually quickly mention the RACI mentoring program has opened up recruitment for 2021. We are now a fully national program. We're in every state and territory, I'm delighted to say. And we very much welcome and encourage you to apply. We will pair you up with a mentor and really help you. Now, somebody's already got the thing. We have a Q&A. We have a Q&A function in Zoom. You are welcome at any point to ask a question in addition to what we're talking about. And other people can also vote up your questions so that we know what's more important to everybody out there. For the first question that has come in, yes, we are recording this event. Yes, it will be made live on YouTube as part of the RACI Careers Development Program offerings in the next few days. So where do we start? Mary, what was your very first job in your chosen field?
I guess probably, well, I was a laboratory demonstrator / tutor at uni during my postgrad time. Then I did a postdoc in the US for a year, but I got homesick. So then, actually, what did I do? Oh, I worked in the University of Sydney Pharmacy Department, making carbon-13 labelled drug analogues for NMR studies, which lasted about a year and a half or so. So that was on a research grant.
Excellent. What about you, David?
So my first real job was at a company called Australian Analytical Laboratories, which was a lab in Sydney that David Carrick owned. And that was a great job. I was extracting fat from fish, and probably doing that for about 12 hours a day. I would sit there extracting fat for a government contract.
So for a piss scheme weight loss program, or
some kind of prior to the EPA, so the SPCC, when they were building the new outfalls on Sydney Harbour. So I would extract the fat, and then someone else would do the pesticides in the fish.
Fair enough. My first job straight out of university was working in a pilot plant for a metallurgy new technology, literally bucketing mud from place to place.
Yep.
So, what about you, Leanne?
My first job was with a firm of accountants. So boring.
No, not at all. Now, look,
it was doing auditing. And it was terrible. But you have to do these jobs.
Because I'd like to make the point, Leanne, you're not actually a chemist by training, are you?
No.
But one of the things that I really wanted to include you in this presentation is for people to understand the diversity of opportunity out there. Not all chemists work in the lab. not by the longest stretch in the world. There is a huge variety of positions out there, and there is something to suit every personality type. And I think it's really important to understand that. I believe at least one of your colleagues at LCU is from a science background. Is that right?
Most of our board of directors are all science background, and that's exactly what you're saying is true. I know our ex-chairman, who's a CSIRO employee and a scientist, doctor in physics and all of that, but he's actually more in a managerial role at CSIRO at the moment. He's the head of the lab there. Doesn't really do any hands-on science work at all anymore. It's about managing people and projects and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, hey, that's the best kind of science. So that's what I do. I tell other people how to do the science without getting my hands dirty. That's perfect. Zero chance I'm going to get killed.
But I mean, in his case, he's as well as his PhD, he's done an MBA. He's done the Institute of Company Directors course. So
yeah, absolutely. So Brian, your first job, both what did you do, and importantly, how did you find it?
My first job, I'm much like Mary. As a 20-year-old, they threw me in with a bunch of 18-year-olds and said, supervise this lot. So having all of the skills of zero safety capacity, I found it quite a challenge to handle about 25 chemistry students who knew less than I did, but not significantly less at that point in their careers. So I found it quite challenging. I guess the next one I got was a data entry person for one of the very early chemistry teaching programs at QUT. So you could log into this thing and do chemistry online. That was probably the dullest job I ever did. I spent probably 7 or 8 weeks, 10 hours a day, locked in a dark room, typing chemical formulas into a piece of software, which half the time didn't work because it was cutting edge. It was brand new. No one was really doing that. So from that perspective, it was a dull job, but the output was really exciting. So that's kind of my start. And I guess from my laboratory experience, we did have quite a few things go bang and pop in our lab as the first and second years sort of did things not quite right.
Yeah.
And that sort of stimulated my interest in chemical safety.
Yeah. And before the era of the JSA?
Yeah, we used to carry pyridine around in open beakers back then. All the organic chemists who were lecturing me at that time are not so well anymore.
Yeah. I managed to give myself 3rd-degree electrical burns in my lab at uni. So
yeah, I managed to take all the fingerprints off my left hand by picking up a furnace that was about 800 degrees C because I'd taken it off, put it on the bench on the asbestos pad, and instead of using the tongs to drop it back on, I just went, I'll just pick that up. Very exciting.
Yeah.
You learn these things.
But we shouldn't say all the bad horror stories to these young impressionable people listening. JSAs are very important. Job safety is very important. I'm sure, David, you don't want us giving bad ideas to any of the young people who are going to become joining EnviroLab.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Okay. How about this question? And I'll put it out to the panel, whoever wants to put their hand up. At what point did networking first start to play a role in your career?
I would probably say it was later in my career. So looking back, I can't remember when I was young anything like this. So there was no mentoring program back then, which is great now. So I would think it wouldn't have been until I actually left being in the bench and moved into more of a sales and a management role that my networking started.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And then how did you hear about the early opportunities in your career? Was it all job ads?
So back then it was job ads in the local paper.
Yeah.
And typewriting your application and posting your application away was it. So I think in a way these days the younger graduates have it a lot easier. The internet is just fantastic, and emails and social media is so great. So in a way, I don't want to whinge about it, but it was quite hard back in our day to find a job, and networking would have made it a lot easier.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah, I got my job, the first one that I mentioned at the pharmacy department. Actually, it was kind of networking because when I returned home to Australia, I went to see the old chemistry colleagues, and they said, "Oh, so and so in the pharmacy department's got a job," and it was only temporary, and I said, "Oh, all right," and yeah, that's how I got that, and then the grant money ran out, and then I got this other job where I was there for 6 years. And then the professor from pharmacy contacted me and said, "Do you want to come and we've got a brand exciting new project. Do you want to come and work for us? Because now you've got these extra skills." And yeah, so I was sort of kind of headhunted for that job. And then actually my break into industry came because there was advertisement on the notice board of the pharmacy department saying we're looking for someone to head up our analytical lab. And that was kind of like, from what I know, that was the second round. Like, they didn't find anybody the first time round, and so instead of advertising, they were trying the universities or contacts in the universities. And so I saw that and I said, "Oh."
It's like they're not saying it's not what you know, it's who you know. Networking's very important.
Yeah. And definitely after, like, as I got established within the industry, networking was extremely important. And even after I was made redundant, I got another job straight away because I knew somebody that had gone to work in another firm.
That was my experience as well when I went from one job to working in credit unions. My boss in the old job had actually left, become the CEO of a credit union, said to me, come across, and that's how I started in that way. And then the credit unions always networked really from years and years ago, collaborated and so yeah, I was networking very early on as far as even conferences and industry association sort of events. But yeah, the initial break into credit unions was who you know.
Yeah. I think my first networking experience was around the fact that I was just nosy. I was really interested in what other people's research was, and I had a bit of a hand. I was very handy at making things because part of my PhD I had to build flow cells and construct things. And so people got to know a little bit that I could build things for them. So my forensic tox job actually came out of the fact that one of the people doing near infrared work, who was working with dingo pheromones, which, by the way, stink like you would not believe, he asked me to build something for him. So I built him this little cell that he could deposit the material in. And we got to be friends and talking, and he was running the toxicological lab for Department of Natural Resources. And when I ran out of money from my PhD, he said, "Oh, I've got some money. Do you want to come and work for me?" So just by being nosy and talkative, that's a form of networking back in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
In the mentoring program, we've been running it for 7, 8 years now. Almost all of our mentees find their job through a network, through the network they build as part of the program. It's one of the most powerful aspects of the mentoring program. And I would actually say, and I'd be interested to get your perspective here, during the COVID era, I would suggest that networking is more important because there's going to be so many applicants for each advertised position that companies are going to try to avoid advertising if they can, and they're going to try and use their networks to avoid having to deal with a crushing number of applicants. Would you agree with my perspective or disagree? I mean, David, particularly, you do a lot, probably the most hiring out of any of us.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that. And certainly before COVID, networking. So face-to-face networking, very important. So I remember going to the mentoring program launch in Sydney, and that was the first one I'd been to, and I was pleasantly surprised that all these young people would just come up to me and introduce themselves to me, and I was quite shocked that you'd trained them well enough to do that, because it can be quite nerve-wracking.
Oh, yeah.
I think it is
to someone. So networking, I can't say enough that networking is so important.
And certainly for our listeners who are not already aware, in our Careers Development Program YouTube webinar list, we have a couple of webinars all about how to network, how to walk into a room full of strangers and make useful connections. So there is materials and resources available there.
And a great tip is, if you're ever going to a function and you're very nervous, get there first, and then everyone comes to you.
Absolutely. And I always say, go to the organizer and say, hi, I'm new here. I'm interested in this and this. Who would you suggest I talk to? And if they don't, I mean, they will at least point someone out, and they'll probably walk you across the room and introduce you.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's one of the things that I found hard about networking when I first started it, which was probably in the sort of mid-2000s for me, was actually starting that conversation. You've actually got to practice that to get good at it. I guess it's not easy, as you were saying, to just walk up to someone and start a conversation. So you've actually got to, the more you practice it, the better you get at it. So you will be uncomfortable the first couple of goes, but after a while, actually talking to strangers becomes a lot easier once you sort of listen to their cues and you pick up on some subjects. So.
And I will note to everybody that the next online networking event, Camaraderie, is on August 5th, and we invite you to participate. It's a good segue, actually, because one of the great things that you can get out of networking, as well as hearing about job opportunities, is hearing about the diversity of options, because a significant number of young scientists, particularly before they graduate, are unsure about what they actually want to do in life. And so it's a great opportunity to hear from lots of different people and say, and ultimately find your inspiration. So Mary, starting with you, for those people, for someone who is unsure about what career path to take in life, what's your advice?
Well, certainly leave your options open. Don't just sort of follow, don't just follow one pathway, like one particular discipline. The other thing, was in.
We can come back to you, Mary. Brian.
I think the trick is to be open about what you like. So learn about things that you like, and they are the things that will drive you further in your career. So if you have a particular bent, like I learned about safety and I developed an interest in it, and that took 10 years. Keep yourself open to all of those options. Keep looking. That's the real thing, because you don't always know what you like until you sample it. It's like eating chocolate, I guess, and I could give some quotes from some silly movie where I can't remember the name of. But if you don't taste it or test it and do the little experiment to say, actually, I really like that, or actually, no, I don't like that, you'll never know. So you've got to go out there and try a few things, be open, look at roles perhaps you wouldn't normally think to take. I never thought I would end up managing amusement safety cases. That was never a role for me if you asked me 10 years ago. But now, here I am. And I get to see the Avengers walk past me going to a training session whilst I'm walking around the amusement park.
That's awesome.
Don't see that every day at work.
Leanne.
Yeah, I think this is such a common situation. Myself, I really had no idea what I wanted to do. When I left school, even I just did accounting because, just that's something to do. And I think it's just a matter of making the most of any opportunities that you're given and learning. And all right, you do have to do some jobs that aren't the most interesting, but that is part of the process of finding what you like and what you don't like. And then, finding something that you're passionate about, I guess, is the next thing, and then if you have a passion for that or a deep interest in it, that's really going to help you to flourish, I think.
Yeah. David, before I go to you, I'm just going to add one quick point. I would always say too, there's no such thing as bad experience. Even if you go to a job that you find that you don't like, you're going to learn useful skills.
Yeah.
In my case, I spent 9 months as a recruitment consultant. And while I loved the people aspect, I dropped out because I couldn't handle saying no again and again and again. It was too hard on my soul. But I learned such useful skills that I have applied for the rest of my career that I don't regret it for 1 second. Now, David, there's going to be a couple of questions coming at you. Firstly, choosing a career, if you're uncertain.
Yeah. So, look, I would agree with the others that, shop around, do different jobs. I would also say, so before COVID and now might be a bit different, but let's pretend COVID's not with us. I would say take risks. I was too conservative. So when I was about 22, I was offered a lab manager position in Mexico. Now, I look back now, absolutely kicking myself that I didn't do it, but I had a job in a lab in Sydney, and I was happy doing that, and I was too scared to go to Mexico. And I was saving for a house and blah blah blah. I absolutely kicked myself for not taking that risk. So I would say to people, take a risk. If you want to try another job, take the risk and try the job. If you want to take a year off and go traveling, take that risk and do it. If you're good and you're a good person and you've got a good work ethic, you will always find a job when you come back.
I will actually say I did that. I took 2 years. I traveled 50,000 kilometers on road through Canada, wrote 3 books, lived an amazing life, and then came back.
See, that sounds fantastic. For me, I'm now going to wait until I'm retired to do that. Because I was stupid.
Sticking with you, David, this is a question that always comes up. Okay, I don't think I've ever seen a webinar where this question didn't come up. So Matthew from the floor has asked, I'd love to get a lab job, but I'm always unsuccessful due to other applicants having more experience. And what's your advice on this?
Always hard, because obviously as someone who is trying to hire a chemist or a lab technician, obviously to make our life easier, we're going to take the person with more experience. So that is always going to be a problem until you can get that experience. So I would say work experience is great. We, and again, I'm going to get sick of saying this, but before COVID, we used to take a lot of people for work experience. A lot of both university students who were finishing up, but also people who had already graduated, we would take them on as well. We're a very good organisation for work experience. I would just warn people though that work experience, you're not going to go in and work on the most expensive machine in the hospital, as they say. You're probably going to get a crappy job in work experience, but Dave, as you said, it's all experience. And the worst work experience issue we had was a couple of years ago, where a student had done a PhD, and we said, yes, you can come in and do work experience. And of course, in a lab like mine, that's aliquoting waters and weighing out soil is the bulk of our work. But she basically, after an hour, walked out and said, no, I'm too good for this. Well, that sort of goes on the blacklist. You're never too good for work experience. Trust me, any work experience is good.
Well, plus, I think a lot of people don't realise that the sampling of the aliquots, the weighing of the soil samples, the precision of getting those samples into your system is a vital part of the overall process of doing contract analytical lab. And so it might be mundane, but it is critically important that it's done well.
That's right. And those positions lead to instrumentation positions as well. So everyone has to start somewhere.
Yeah. And there's very, very few jobs in the modern workplace that are pointless. They might not be fun, but they're not pointless.
True.
I want to throw in here my good friend Ross McFarland from ACOM. ACOM is hiring at the moment. They have a graduate program that they're hiring, and you can see that on our there's a jobs board on the DCS website, dcstechnical.com.au. So Ross McFarland from ACOM has said, "Hi Dave, I agree that you need to be flexible in the start of your career, but it is also important to follow your passion and have a longer term objective and keep looking for things that align with your objective." I completely agree with you, Ross, except to say, I don't think that you need to walk out of university at age 22 and know what you want to do at age 50. I think that there's time enough to learn.
Yeah, plenty of time.
Yeah, and your career sort of evolves. I started off running the analytical lab, and I went into doing safety assessments on animal drugs. And just going back to the lack of experience in our analytical lab, it was what would I call it? It's a bit like forensic work, and we hardly ever got people who, when we advertised, who fulfilled the criteria that we wanted. And often I would just go to my friend who worked at the uni and ask her, "Well, have you got any good honest students, that are finishing up? I'm in need of someone." And the idea was we would train them up. And again, this is where the networking came in, because my colleague or friend at uni would say, "Oh yeah, I've got this couple of good honest students, why don't you interview them?" And this is just by the by, one of the best people I ever hired was a lady who had sent in an application to another department in our facility, and she just didn't quite fit the bill, what they wanted. So the department head gave me her resume, and I said, "Oh boy, I'm going to get this woman as soon as I have a vacancy."
And I might just throw in as well, Mary, that's a really good point about the universities. There are times when we are desperate for staff, and our easiest thing to do is to call up our contacts at the universities and say, "Who have you got? Who are your good students?" Now, I mentioned this to the Young Careers group when I did a presentation recently. But if you're at university, encourage your lecturers to become friends with industry. So if we need staff, we go straight to Danny Wong at Macquarie University. So Danny's the New South Wales RACI president, but he is also we have a great relationship with him. And for us, we often don't have time to advertise. And why advertise when we go straight to Danny? So get your chemistry lecturers to become friends with industry. Very important.
And I'd only encourage you to put the mentoring program on your list as well, because as that program gains reputation, what we're finding is more and more employers are saying they've been through the program, they're more job ready, I'll give them preference.
Yep, exactly.
Yep.
Now, we've had another question from the floor. I know we've got a list of questions that we had planned to go through, but we can always be flexible. For those, when you're going through a career change, is it difficult to give up what you've been doing to try something new? Do you feel obligated to stay in the job if there's still room for promotion? For me, the answer is hell no. To me, the issue is, it's not one door closes, another door opens. It's a perpetual field of open doors, and it's just choosing which door you want to walk through. But, your perspective, Brian.
Look, I fully agree with you. I've done IT projects as part of being a chemist. I've done amusement park stuff now as being a chemist. What I find is it going to be something that I'm going to enjoy? Can I follow it? Can I learn something from it? What am I going to get just for me? Not necessarily my big career step. It could be a little career step. It doesn't have to be all that big. But you know, you always look for that opportunity. One of the things I learned a few years ago from a guy who was a paramedic, who now runs one of the big, actually he's moved on now, he used to run one of the big gas plants up in Gladstone. And I said to him, how on earth did you get from being a paramedic to running a chemical plant on an island? And he said, I never said no to anything. Every opportunity came along, I said, yes, I can have a go at that. And he said, some of them were great. Some of them were absolute bloody disasters. But I learned something from it. And I think I share his philosophy in that respect. Try everything you can get your hands on, because you never know what might be of interest, and you never know what the next door will be open after you've tried it.
Yeah. Coming back to something you said before, David, you didn't take up an opportunity because you were lacking in confidence about that opportunity.
Yep.
But one of the things that I think that it's worth reminding people is, if a colleague, particularly a boss, comes to you at any point in your career and says, can you have a go at this? Your answer should always be yes. Because the boss is only going to ask you for two reasons. Either it needs to be done and it doesn't matter if the person doing it isn't going to get it perfect, or they're saying, I see something in you,
that's it,
even if you don't see it yourself.
Absolutely. Yes, yes. And I will do that now. So if some of the young guys, you know, show an interest and they want to learn more and they want to do more, and they come to us and say, you know, do you have anything else I need to do? They're the people that want to get ahead. Yeah, absolutely.
They've got the interest.
Yes.
They're interested in their things.
Yeah.
And if you show interest, people respond to that.
Yes.
Yeah. And quite often, you know, other people can see the qualities in you and, you know, your potential more than you can, you know, because you're young, you haven't had a lot of experience. And I know, looking at some of our staff, you know, I can see where they could go. They may not realise that themselves yet. So, yeah, it's definitely about never say no if you're given an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Buy yourself a copy of Dr. Seuss's Oh, the Places You Can Go and read it again. So, well, here's a corollary questions on the same topic from Andrew. Where are the best places to look if you'd like to branch out of just chemistry? How might you manipulate your experience studying chemistry for different career paths? Now, I'll have first go at this and everybody jump in. I would say that, firstly, the best place to find a job is from a job. When you are employed, you are more employable. So while you have the luxury of having a job, you have the luxury of time to go out and find an alternative and explore the alternatives. And I would say the best place to explore the alternatives is via networking.
Yeah.
Right? But jump in. Mary.
Just going back to my early career, working on various grant-funded projects at universities, or I worked at a hospital for 6 years. I mean, I got the job because I was a chemist, but I actually did very little chemistry in some of those jobs. I did more biochemistry, sort of medicine type stuff, biology, and they can be quite varied. And I mean, obviously, because they're grants, they're for a certain number of years. So it's not secure employment, but it's quite a lot of variability in the type of work, particularly for a chemist. I think a chemist can do a lot of things in the science area, apart from administration type things. But in the science area, if you've got a chemistry background, you can do biology, biochemistry. You know, I was in the vet area, so you can do a lot of interesting stuff in other areas. And
also that it's, you know, there's lab jobs, but there's lab jobs in research, in manufacturing, in quality, in safety, in you know, there's management consulting, there's technical writing, there's just this huge variety of options out there, and there's something to appeal to everyone.
And it could be a field that is very close to a chemistry field. So a lot of our staff, if they move on, they might become environmental consultants or occupational hygienists. So quite different, but very similar. And as if Ross McFarlane's in the audience, he'll probably agree with me that the best environmental consultants have worked in a lab before, or a chemist. But I also know some chemists who went on to a bit like Leanne, bit onto accounting or into IP. So, totally office-based, but using their chemistry skills in IP or in scientific investment for investment firms. So, that could be science and commerce together.
Yeah. Now, I will also quickly mention, because people were going back to that topic of getting experience. For those of you who are in Victoria and to a lesser extent New South Wales, CS Executive Recruitment, which is otherwise known as ChemSkill, and again you can find the links on the DCS website. They have a program, they call it work skill, work life, work something, where you can get paid internships. So worth noting. On the same topic, one of the questions from the floor is, if you don't have PR, what if you're an international student and you don't have PR? How does that affect your ability to get work and work experience? I mean, the short answer is it can be very difficult, simply because, firstly, Brian, they're pretty much ruled out of government, aren't they?
I believe so, unfortunately. Yeah, you need to be pretty much an Australian citizen, from what I understand. Yeah. So we have had, having said that, in the Major Hazards Facility team, we have had an awful lot of international people come through our team on long-term visa arrangements. So if you can get that sort of residency visa, I think it's called, you're right for government jobs, but it's very difficult to get it otherwise.
But you've hit the nail on the head, Brian, because the issue is longevity of your visa. When a company hires you and they're going to have to train you and they want you to stay for long enough to get a return on their investment, and Leanne, I'm sure you agree with this, that's the stumbling block. It's not that we don't want someone from international. In fact, many of the international skills and cultural stuff can be really useful, but it's a risk to take on someone without knowing that they'll be able to continue to work for you. Now, David, in your business, Envirolab has a very high reputation as an excellent employer, and therefore you would have lower turnover than most of your contemporary, your competing companies, right? Some of the others like Symbio and stuff are known to have a very high turnover. But necessarily the contract analytical work is known to have a higher turnover than a lot of other industries. To what extent does residency visa play a role in your recruitment?
Yeah, so we would only take a permanent resident for a full-time job. I think for work experience it would be fine. We would take someone for work experience, but we often use work experience to find permanent staff. So a little try before you buy type of thing. So there was a stage when I would pretty much say 95% of our work experience students, we would give a job after they were with us for a little while. So that would be a problem. Training is a big investment. So the strategy that you would advise for someone who does not yet have their permanent residency or their long-term visa, the only one that I can really advise is go for the jobs, like register with the recruitment agencies, particularly with the temp agencies, and go for the temp, the casual, the contract roles. Yes.
That are not where the employer isn't looking for longevity, and therefore it doesn't matter.
Exactly. You're still going to get the experience. You're going to get paid for it. That would be my advice too.
And
they may not be the desirable job either. They may be in the places where you, from your experience at university, people go through those places. Take them, because if you can get a role there and survive for a while, that's good. That's good information for your next employer.
Yeah. And I will say, in previous employment, I used to deliberately hire people from international backgrounds because I know that regardless of where you're from, if you move between countries, you have a vested interest to work your ass off to make good in your new in your new home.
Yep.
And so at one point, out of 27 employees, we recorded a marketing video in 22 languages.
Wow. I think we could do 17. So 22 is good.
Yeah, that was good. There we go. Hugh in Victoria has mentioned the CS executive recruitment. It's called UniWorks. I knew work was in there somewhere. And apparently Hugh is also telling us that CSL is opening their grad program right now in case anyone's interested. Yes, excellent. Okay, right. Next on our list, let's go back to our planned questions. Here's a good one. Thinking back, what have been the noticeable behavioural differences in your colleagues who've gone from strength to strength in their careers compared to those who have struggled? Mary, do you want to jump in there?
I haven't thought of an answer.
Okay, all right.
Well, certainly diligence. In our area, like in the sort of pharmaceutical area, it was sort of attention to detail was very important. Diligence, well, no sloppy work. They're sort of the fundamental things, I think. And basically for the employee wanting new opportunities. So, give them something a little bit harder to do or a different type of project, and or maybe they go for a temporary assignment in another department.
Yeah. Bite off more than you can chew and then chew hard.
Yeah.
Have to keep chewing.
Leanne, what about you?
In the banking world, a lot of it has to do with, I think, ethics and also your reputation.
Right. So you're saying if you don't have ethics, you're just going to do fine in banking? I'm sorry. It's isn't it right? It's like the personality test for government. If you have one, you don't get in.
I can only talk from the credit union perspective, not the big bank perspective. But when I look at my colleagues who've worked for other credit unions, people who've progressed through the organisations and whatever, it's a lot about their, I guess, how they treat other people as well. Because banking's not all just about money and figures. Banking is about people, really. So yeah, how they treat other people, their reputation, yeah.
Absolutely.
As well as the hard work and that sort of thing.
Right. David?
Yeah, I'd agree with all that. I'd also say it's the nice people that get ahead. If you are easygoing and a nice person, I think about it in your private life. If you're the type of person who has constant issues with both sets of neighbours over trees and dogs, and if you've got problems like that, you're going to have problems in the workplace. I think I've based my career on being easygoing and nice, and a good science nerd, and very positive and well organised.
You're absolutely right, David. And I would actually say, because I was the opposite, I was a prickly bastard when I first came into the world, and it took me a long time to learn to get along with people, and that held my career back.
Yep.
Right?
I'd have to agree with that. Look, the aggressive, prickly person who wants to do everything their way.
Yes.
They're always late for stuff, but they've always got an issue with being late because something else happened to them. They're never going to be, they're never focused or happy about the things they were doing. So the opportunities miss them because they're focused on some other opportunity that they've always wanted, and they don't see the ones in front of them.
Yeah.
That clarity, that calmness that comes often with the good people, the nice people who just want to get the work done, they understand it. They're the ones that take that jump up. Not always. I've seen the aggressive, prickly person go a long way. with no understanding as to how they got there, or perhaps how they even got those things. But
Right, no one likes them.
Yeah, no one likes them. No one wants to have nobody wants to have a beer with them after work. And they're unhappy all the time. So they generate unhappy, therefore they actually create the situation where people don't talk to them, they don't get those little opportunities that build a big one.
Yeah.
So
Mary, the point is that you can't be a consultant and in your own business and be prickly. You have to be good.
Oh, no. You have to, do everything to satisfy your client. And I guess communication is an important thing too. Like if you're going to be late with something, let your boss or your client know, listen, I've got a problem. I had problems with an elderly parent sort of during my working life, and actually that taught me to actually try and do the job earlier than what the deadline was, because you don't know what's around the corner. But your bosses or your team or your co-workers, etc., if you explain, well, listen, I've got this personal issue, with family, etc., normally they'll understand. And so, yeah, communication, don't sort of hide stuff. If you've got a problem, don't sort of bottle it up. Tell your boss, like, I'm having problems with so-and-so, or, the instruments aren't working properly, I don't know, blah, blah, blah. It's far worse if you sort of hide stuff. And, yeah, I certainly agree with David's comments and everybody else's comments about this sort of prickly, aggressive people.
Absolutely. Now, would you believe I've actually just realised that the version of the question list I'm working on is the old version, not the new version. My version doesn't have the COVID questions in it. Darn it. Okay. So while I try and find that, apologies to everybody here. Why don't we talk about quickly, Brian, starting with you. Who in your career has made an impression? Without giving names, how did they make an impression? How did they inspire you?
Oh gosh, when I read this question, I thought, wow, where do I start with that? Because so many people influence you in so many different ways. I know the prickly, difficult lecturer at QUT who used to scare the bejesus out of me whenever I handed an assignment in. When I got to postdoc, turns out he was a really nice bloke. But he was just prickly and difficult with the students because he wanted to push them. So he inspired me because I recognised he put on a persona to deal with the students, and he picked the ones that he liked. And he understood that there was a difference between the ones that were going to go somewhere and not. And I guess my external PhD supervisor, he was great. He owned his own business. He worked really hard at it. And he was clever about the things that he did. And I drew things from him as well. So I try to find, even my current boss and my just past boss, I try to find those little elements in them that I can use to learn about me and the way I could work to do better, to get that next position for me. So you never stop looking for those inspiring people, in my mind.
Absolutely right.
Leanne,
would you like to jump in?
Yeah, I have a number as well. My old boss, for a start, really taught me a lot about, handling people and how to treat your employees, and really, I guess, promoted me and helped me along the way. But then later on, looking at some of the people that we've had on our board of directors who, top scientists, really in their fields, but the most wonderful people, and really, members of the Benevolent Society, and wanted to come on the board of the credit union because they wanted to help others, but brilliant, really, really top scientists in their field. So I guess it's when you see those people that can combine all of these elements and are successful but at the same time can sit down and talk to anybody. That inspires me.
Yeah.
Okay. Look, I would say, and I'll actually name him here. I used to work with a man called Philip Wood, who was the managing director of an ASX-listed company that I was working for. And I think the thing for me about him was that he cared about each and every one of our staff. He found a way to make a positive business outcome of every accommodation that we had to make for a staff member. So as example, we had a staff member who had a 16-year-old daughter who was acting out. And she came to us and she said, it was me and the boss, and she said, I'm concerned, we're coming up to summer holidays and I don't know how I'm going to handle this. Can you offer any advice? And Philip said, let's employ her for the summer. He gave her not just a waste of time job, but a genuinely interesting, useful job. She found her inspiration. Her grades turned around. She went back to school the next year. Her grades shot up. The whole behavior changed. Found a way to work positively with our staff. And, for the couple of grand that it cost us that summer, we ended up with an employee who was loyal for life.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Okay. Now, I'm aware that it's already 7:30. Hasn't this gone quickly? So let's get to the $1 million COVID question. So here we go. The COVID crisis is pretty much unique. None of us here have encountered anything quite like this before, but we have lived through at least one recession. What extra things can an early career scientist do at the start of their career when the job market is bad, right? And, if you like the corollary question, how did you actually handle Keating's recession that we had to have? Now, David, do you want to start?
Very timely. So I had to Google when the recession was, and it was, I think, 1990 or 1991. Anyway, that was basically the year after I graduated, and I had a huge, so it is very similar to COVID, is Keating's recession. I think I was on the dole for a year. There were no jobs at all, which was quite depressing. So I did work experience. So I couldn't get any lab work experience. So I got a job, work experience at the Royal Botanic Gardens in the herbarium. So I was sewing dried plants onto bits of paper, which I love doing, and now I'm very much into botany as well. But so I took any work experience I could get. And even though nothing to do with the lab, it was good. And, you're straight out of uni. I was in there with all the old retired people who volunteer at the Botanic Gardens. So they would talk to me, and I would listen to them and learn how to talk to them and have cups of tea with the old ladies. And it was all good social interactions. So, very similar times. COVID will be very tough. So I mentioned before, we're actually not taking on work experience students until we'll reassess that in September. So it's probably still a few bad months for everyone.
Is that an economic decision, or is that a health
decision? That is simply it's a business decision. Obviously, we have to have all of our staff here in the lab. We don't have we have a few finance and HR people working from home, but the rest of us have to be here testing the samples. So we can't risk having too many strangers come in. We can't be knocked out. So
yeah, no, absolutely. Leanne, you might have been a bit young to have experienced that recession.
No. Yeah, that's what I had to sort of think back as well. But and as I said to you guys earlier, I had my first home loan then, and interest rates were 17%. Can you believe it? For me, I guess I was young, and I had a job, so. I can't say that back in that recession I really, other than the fact that, funds were tight and, paying a home loan of 17% wasn't easy. But yeah, I can see that the COVID situation is going to probably go on a lot longer than that, and a lot longer and harder. And, the credit union's been in a position where we were going to, prior to this, employ a new staff member. That's, we've called a halt to that. Similar, we do have some staff working from home, but, how do you get somebody in, train them? All of this part of it is a business decision that our loan demand has sort of dried up. Yeah. But also it's just logistically too difficult. So, but back when I did sort of Google how long ago it was and try and think back to what was I doing at the time, it was, difficult.
Yeah. I was actually quite lucky because I was on grant money at the time, so NH&MRC or ARC or whatever. So that money was guaranteed, and I had a job at a okay wage, so it didn't affect me that much. Regarding COVID, I just have an interesting example of my friend's daughter who graduated with I think a master's in stats and got an internship at the beginning of the year with a big bank to do some sort of data analysis. And when COVID hit, so she was allocated to the customer service desk and having to deal with, customers who are having money problems. So, the bank just reassigned her, and in fact, all the interns were reassigned to call centre customer service. She was working from home. Yeah. I don't know. I would say try and get a job somewhere.
And look, that's a key point, Mary. You can cross-skill without going back to university, right? Going back and doing further study is an expensive and slow way to find a job. But there's nothing to stop you from picking up an accounting textbook and reading, buy the cheapest, most battered copy from the university bookshop and read the first half, become familiar with the terms of accounting, the terms of economics, the terms of business, because science is a business. And every job that you have, even if you are doing the soil samples in David's lab, it has a business context to that job. So cross-skilling, any work that you can get is good work. Remember, as I said before, the best place to find a job is from a job.
Yeah, or even volunteering, like I'm sure Food Bank or Vinnie's or whatever would take on volunteers, or maybe depending on maybe not in Melbourne, but and the thing is, you might meet someone who knows somebody that might help you with a job. Yeah,
and I found jobs that way. I found a job once by having a chat to somebody who worked in a service station. I was buying petrol and got to chatting to someone, to the person behind the counter, and it turned out she was just helping there on the weekend to help her brother out, but she actually ran a company. And I got a job that way. So, look, I do want to cover one of the questions are coming in thick and fast now. We won't have time to answer them all, but one of the corollary questions is when you are unemployed for a long time, how do you handle that? How do you handle the emotions? Like David, you said you're unemployed for a year. I mean, it's going to crush your confidence. How do you keep your confidence up?
Yeah, well, it was a long time ago. I can't remember. I think I just kept busy with the volunteer work. And I know you've just said don't go back to uni, but I think at the time I enrolled in an external course thinking about changing careers. So I enrolled in an agricultural science course as well, which I never finished because I found a job. Because after a year I found a job.
Yeah, I would only say further study doesn't guarantee you a job. It's a long, expensive way that doesn't guarantee you an outcome. So there are alternatives that might give a faster, better outcome.
Yeah.
Brian, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, look, when my PhD scholarship ran out, I toddled off to the Dole office, and I'd already done a master's at this point, and I was about 2/3 of the way through the first version of my PhD. I'd spent the better part of probably 10,000 hours on Word at the time, And the first thing they said to me is, oh, well, you have to be unemployed for a long time, like at least 6 weeks before we give you any money. I think that was the number. And I will send you on a Word training course. And I'm looking at this person going, what are you going to teach me about Word? You're not going to teach me anything about Word. I've done Word to death. And I know if you want the money, you have to go to a Word training course. So I packed up my bags, I walked out, and I vowed, I just went straight back to uni that day, and I started talking to people. And that's how I got my first job post my PhD. Well, not even post my PhD, before I actually finished it. Talking to Bob Parker, fixed up something for him. He said, oh, I've got a job going. That was how I did it. I just kept talking to people, finding people. I was unemployed for 3 weeks. I thought it was the end of the world.
Yeah. And look,
I don't know how you do it for longer.
I always say treat finding a job as a job.
Yeah.
Right? You show the same behavioural traits as if you had a job. So put in the effort to find the job that you would when you're actually doing the job. But Brian, tweaking on that, what you've just said is basically treat it as if you've got a sales job. Go out, make connections, do it as a series of sales calls to various people to make the connections, to learn the things, and treat it in that respect.
Yep.
My job is finding a job.
The funny thing about that was I wrote an application for the Animal Research Institute. I didn't know the person who was there, but I had a contact who knew who he was, who gave me their telephone number. And I rang them to say, what happened to my job application? That was a mistake. They wanted to know how I found their phone number. I thought it was great research skills.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that we do in the careers development program, in the mentoring program, is we do what we call facilitated networking. So you come to us, you say, I'm interested in going to this area or that area, and we introduce you to people so that you don't have that circumstance of how did you get my number?
Yeah.
You know, then you know, you get that warm introduction and it starts. Now, importantly, you're not then going to someone and saying, do you have a job for me? You're saying, what can I learn about your position? How do I get into your field? Let them give you advice. And once you're on their radar, if there's an opportunity, they're more likely to let you know.
It is so worthwhile spending that time just listening to people and understanding them. And that will help, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I'm just looking at our question list. Okay. Interesting question from George on the floor. As an Australian, after Australian postgrad education, how long is it practically viable to be considered for a lab chemist job if you're unable to secure one immediately?
I mean, straight away, if we had a position going, you know, there's no set time.
Yeah, but I think he's asking, if you're out of the field for a while, how do you break back in?
Oh, right.
I think the answer is with persistence.
Yeah.
And networking.
Yeah, exactly. All the stuff we've just talked about. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I love this question. Person hasn't given their name, but they said, on the personality and people skills discussion we were having before, how do you see employees that are quiet and nice, but will communicate and reach out whenever they're needed? I say, perfect. There is no one better.
I would say that's good as well. There's nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with that at all.
If they cause no waves and ask when they need, that's the perfect combination.
Yep.
It's the ones who don't ask when they need that really cause merry hell.
Or the ones sometimes they just keep knocking at your door. Oh, the worst was always they wanted pay rises and you couldn't just give them a pay rise. That was really annoying being a manager.
Yeah. All right. Somebody's asked, I don't know if we're qualified to answer this. What advice would you give to someone who's interested in an academic career? Does anyone have a perspective? Mary, you're probably the closest to this answer.
Well, I guess you'd have to do a postgraduate degree and stick around at the university, work on research grants. If there's no immediate position available, just hang around the university doing, research on, short-term employment, hoping that there's going to be a vacancy. and that then obviously the rest of the faculty know you, and so hopefully you would be considered for that job.
I would also say, while you're doing your PhD, because presumably if you want an academic career, you're doing a PhD, cultivate your networks outside of academia, because either two things are going to happen. Either you're going to decide, yes, I want a job outside academia, in which case that network's going to be useful. But if you decide to stay in academia, having outside contacts, the ability to bring projects into the university and funding into the university basically gives you a job to go forward with.
Yeah.
How about that question from Edward? What could universities do to improve the career outcomes and employability of recent graduates? That's quite a good one.
Teach them anything about getting a job rather than just about chemistry? Sorry.
Yeah, that's right. So I would say both. So I would say universities need to improve their pracs, their lab skills. I've said this a lot of times. Oftentimes, I would choose a chemistry TAFE graduate over a university graduate because they have a better prac for what I need in my business, better hands-on. But also, Edward, I would say that universities need to teach a subject on life skills. I don't want staff to get a job and they can't communicate with anyone. I don't want staff that sit in the lunchroom on their phones the whole time. They need to interact with people. And I think universities, it's a shame that you've got to say it, but universities need to teach some common life skills.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, I am an adjunct senior lecturer at Uni New South Wales, and I participate in the Chem 6048 subject where I teach how to find a job.
Ah, very good.
Yeah.
Guys, Brian?
People management skills. Learning. I came out of my chemistry degree as a geek. Let's face it. I like books. I like being in the library. I like reading. I like researching things. People skills are so important in moving forward in your career and understanding how to manage people and things about how people work. And we don't teach that unless you go and do a psychology course, or you just learn those skills as you go. So the universities could assist by simply giving that broader skill base, a little bit of people management skills. I remember we did management at uni in 1989, long time ago. It was useless. I couldn't relate to it. So bringing that why is this important to me argument to the course would be useful.
It's an interesting perspective, Brian, because is there not a danger, as it is, that a university person comes out of the workplace saying, I've got a university degree, I've learned everything I need to learn, now I'm ready to manage people? How often, David, as example, do people come into an interview with you and say, I want to be a manager in the next 3 years?
Quite often.
Right.
And it doesn't happen.
That's not how it works.
Not usually.
And I guess that's what I'm talking about. People have very big expectations.
Yeah.
They're unreasonable.
Yeah.
You know, and so how do we teach, how do people learn that those expectations are unreasonable? I never expected that when I left uni, but in order to assist and to manage the people I was working with, or to help manage those people, it would have been useful to have some skills around those elements, just basic psychology, understanding people. I don't know.
And
they certainly need to improve their laboratory work, that's for sure.
So much of management theory comes out of America, and America is culturally vastly different to Australia. You start trying to apply American management theory to an Australian workplace, and you're gonna have trouble.
Yeah.
I mean, I worked at the end. I worked for an American company, and yeah, it just didn't. It didn't work. Not with Australians, and even the Europeans didn't like the American way of management. The other thing I would say for uni graduates is for them to be able to work in a team. Like certainly in industry, you work in teams, like a product development team. People from different disciplines all get together, including marketing, which tends to be the worst because they don't understand science. But you've got to be able to work together. Like generally there's a plan of, you know, you do this, you do this, you do this, you do that in parallel, a bit like developing a COVID vaccine or something like that. And so communication is very important, and also for the scientists to be able to communicate their contribution in a non-technical way. Sometimes the scientists, I noticed, would really get so technical that sort of the project manager who might have been, say, for instance, a vet, didn't understand. Certainly the marketing people didn't understand at all. Yeah. So you had to be very clear, you know, in what you were saying, sort of kind of dumbing it down, but making sure that the important points are there, all the risks associated with any decisions that were being made.
Look, you're absolutely right, Mary. I have a science degree and a business degree, and I've basically formed a career out of translating between the two paradigms.
Yeah, and I guess that's part of the psychology thing. You need to understand your audience. You need to understand the people you work with to make that communication effective. And sometimes you've got to learn it doesn't work and you can't do it, and you've got to step away from those people. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, your perspective?
Yeah, I think managing people and working with people, you know, a lot of it is just trial and error in the long run. And, you know, coping with different personalities and whatever, a lot of that's just your own experience as you go through, and a bit of your own maturity as well, I think. But, you know, looking at the successful scientists that I deal with, it is that, whether you want to call it dumbing down or, you know, as Mary said, but it's being able to communicate in a way that the layman can understand as well, I think. And when I look at our board of directors, you know, very, very smart people, but they also work well together. They respect each other's views.
That's the key point, Leanne. I mean, I actually don't like the term dumbing down because it suggests a hierarchy of intelligence. I prefer translating. Because, for instance, some years ago, I was responsible for a project that was going ahead in a highly contentious area with two actively opposed community groups. And of course, these community groups were people from a very low socioeconomic area who didn't have a lot of scientific understanding. And the first meeting I held with each group, they said, all right, tell us what you're going to do, like very aggressively. And I said, well, I can't exactly tell you what we're going to do because I don't know exactly what we're going to do. I came here to talk to you, to understand your concerns and to incorporate your concerns into our project plan before we make the project plan, not tell you what we're going to do. And it completely changed the paradigm of that interest, showing them the respect to say, we're going to listen, we're going to communicate, we're going to adapt, made all the difference in the world.
And you get them on side. That's good.
Yeah.
That is good.
Okay, look, we've pretty much run out of time, and I'm sorry.
Do we just have one? Do we just have time for Sandra's question?
Yeah.
So Sandra's just asking about with COVID that the universities have stopped all their labs at the moment, and you know how are you going to get a job without labs? Sandra, that is a very important question. I'll answer your second part first in that, yes, we never just take on people and expect you to do the work. There's always training in labs. Unless you're very senior in your role and we expect you to come in and you know, after 20 years experience, you will always get on-the-job training. So don't worry about that. And also, I'll just mention that the RACI is very concerned about the lack of labs, and we're just starting to think about that as well. And it's when you go for a job, the employers are going to understand that your labs have been cancelled. Basically, it's a shame, but there's not much that the world can do about it at the moment. So I wouldn't worry about it.
And it's actually good. Speaking on behalf of the RACI there, David, we should mention that you are a board member of RACI. So
yes, and that was a topic in our board meeting just the other day.
Anyone else got a perspective you want to add here, or? No? Okay. All right. Well, let's wrap up for tonight. Thank you, everybody. So here we go. Tonight has been another event as part of the RACI Careers Development Program. Through webinars, networking event, mentoring, lectures and workshops, the RACI Careers Development Program aims to help graduating students get the best possible student start in their career. I should change that wording because we're also reaching out to early career chemists as well. Our upcoming career events include our next online networking event, Camaraderie, which is 5th of August. And our next webinar is all about choosing a career path, and that's the 13th of August. The recording of this event will be uploaded to the RACI Careers Development YouTube channel over the next few days, as well as to my own careers site, dcstechnical.com.au/careers. In the meantime, our thanks to all of the presenters tonight, Brian Krieger, Leanne Harris of LCU, Mary Small and David Springer, and most particularly to our sponsors, Envirolab, Laboratory Credit Union and DCS Technical. So thank you very much, everybody.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great night, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Stay safe.
Yes.
All righty.